now come to order. Did I overwrite us? Okay. Chair, if you please call the roll. Or clerk, sorry.
Chair Cavett.
Here.
Representative Borton.
Here.
Representative Markkinen. Representative Steckloff.
Present.
Representative Price.
Here.
Mr. Chair, 4 of 5 members are present. A quorum of the subcommittee is present.
Thank you. Rep. Price approves the minutes from April 22nd. There being no objections, the minutes are approved. Okay. Today, everybody, we would like to welcome Director Roos from Eagle, and we're just going to invite him right up. So thank you very much for being here. We look forward to your presentation.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm joined by Travis Boskell, who is Deputy Director, and it's a privilege to be here. Appreciate you inviting us here. Appreciate the vice chairs and all the members of the committee. And I know you've had a chance to visit with some of our division heads and others in the department. I hope those have been helpful discussions, and we're always glad to give you a little deeper view on all things Eagle.
Very much so. Thank you, Director.
I'm honored to be here today to present an overview of our budget, starting with the fiscal 25 budget, and then we give some highlights for the proposed fiscal 26 budget, the governor's exec rec. I'll just start by giving a couple of overview slides here. Whenever I think about what is Eagle all about, I think about now about 1,570 employees. It's a range of, it's a really talented group from engineers to toxicologists to geologists to law enforcement officers and support staff. And it feeds me every day that I'm doing this job when I see that they're on the front lines to try to protect our air, land, water, and energy resources, and they do it on behalf of the 10 million people of Michigan who depend upon it, not just for their health, but for their livelihood and way of life. They do a range of functions from taking samples to analyzing lab results to cleaning up contaminated sites to permitting, but all of those are in service of that mission. I've been in this role about a year and 9 months, I think now, and one of the first things that I felt there was a need to do is to really establish a time-bound vision or ambition for the agency of what we wanted to accomplish, where we wanted to be within a fairly short period of time. And the words on the page kind of show that, the vision was for Michigan to be an enduring national leader in environmental protection, to redefine and the way we measure success as much as we can around actual impact that we're having, positive impact that we're having on folks around the state. It became pretty clear to me within the first month on the job, and I come from the private sector. I spent my whole life in the private sector, that the work that we do plays a really important role in economic development and growth, jobs, whether people have money in their pockets, and as well as helping communities to thrive. And so when we think about environmental protection and being an enduring national leader, one that would last, we really think about that more expansively. The environmental protection and then all the positive results that will come from that if we do our jobs right. And it's a big burden, it's a big responsibility, but we try to hold ourselves up to that. So one of the first things we did is to establish stretch goals across the agency. What were some things that we could do that would really have impact within a 2-3 year time period? And that has helped to shape where we focus a lot of our priorities as an overlay to the basic regulatory work that we do. That's the core of the work. We've tried to create a culture of a continuous improvement, constantly raising the bar, certainly on environmental protection, but also on service. And that's a challenge. We have a lot of interactions with people. A lot of it's in the permitting function where people don't always like the decisions that we make, but we try our best to be solutions-oriented and get to things that are helpful and then will have a positive economic benefit while protecting our environment. And then I'm going to just give you a couple examples of some of the impacts that we've had over the years, and some of these are pretty recent. One of the biggest areas that I know everybody in this room is familiar with is investing in water infrastructure. The governor made that a big commitment at the beginning of her term, and we have really focused on that. We have a lot of aging infrastructure, both in drinking water and in wastewater, stormwater, you name it. 50 to 100-year-old infrastructure, sometimes older. And it needs to be upgraded. There have been decades of deferred maintenance, and so a lot of that's coming home to roost. So over the past few years, the agency, on behalf of the administration, state of Michigan, has invested $5.3 billion in upgrading that infrastructure. And it's really at a point where it's starting to really transform the infrastructure that we have to ensure we have clean drinking water, affordable drinking water also, and our waterways remain safe. The nice thing about that is it's also had pretty direct economic benefits, and you'll see that theme going throughout this. It's estimated that about 75,000 jobs have been supported by that work. But also, that work is often something that wouldn't have been possible without the state and our federal partners playing a role in providing that investment, whether it's grants or loans, because it would have gone on to the ratepayers when eventually that infrastructure would have needed to be replaced. And that's our state revolving fund's a big part of that. Air quality is another area that some of these things they don't have big steps right out of the gate, takes time, but if you look at the 20-year time period, we've seen pretty continuous improvement in the air quality across the state. We continue to be vigilant about that. There's a lot more to do, but we have made a lot of progress there. One area that's particularly interested me is the area of contaminated site prevention and cleanup. And brownfield redevelopment. We have over 26,000 known contaminated sites in the state, half of which the state is the responsible party. And that means, if I can show you a map of everybody's district, and you'll see a number of them there, and it just weighs on me and the department that we really want to make progress on that. So we've really redoubled our efforts there. We've made a big impact in terms of the number of sites we've addressed, and we've also taken a backlog of about 10,000 sites that hadn't even been assessed yet due to lack of manpower, womanpower. And we finally have been able to assess those and then prioritize them in terms of which ones need to be addressed first. The Brownfield Redevelopment Program returns $45 in private investment for every dollar we put into it. So we've really leaned into that to redevelop some of these properties, and it really can be transformational for communities. And then finally, in the area of modernizing and improving processes, this is a big area. We have a lot more work to do, obviously, there, but we've made a lot of progress in the last 5 years. We have literally hundreds, maybe thousands of files and file cabinets loaded with records. A good number of those have been digitized, and we've been able to make those available online to reduce the number of FOIA requests. And I think we've reduced the number of FOIA requests by 10% or a number like that. That's saving people money on the outside. And it's also making it more efficient for us. And you'll see a request in the current budget to double down on our efforts there. We've also added air quality permits to our online permitting system to just make that a lot easier, better service, kind of one-stop shop for whatever your permitting needs are within that area. So we continue that process of having all of our permitting functions online. And I'll turn it over to Travis here.
Okay. Real quick before the director has a chance to talk a little bit about some of the things in the FY26 budget. I'm going to zoom back to kind of current year and actually even a little before that. You know, as you all, as we have the division directors and then you all get to hear how they do their jobs, you hear how the money on the ground is spent and the work that we're doing, but maybe give you a little acquaintance on 10,000 foot level, the Eagle budget, where does the money that you all appropriate come from? Where does it go? What does it provide? So before we actually get to FY25, I'm going to start with FY24 in this slide on the page because we have our finalized expenditures here. 63% of the money that we spent as Eagle in FY24 went out the door as grants and loans. Most of those are to communities that you all represent and serve. They're to local units of government, but that also includes nonprofits, businesses, colleges, universities, and there are even some for-profit companies that receive grants from us, market development grants, that type of thing. I won't run through that entire list of grants and loans, those programs that you see on there, but it's not lost on me that the Eagle budget, it has a billion number after it, and after the longest time it was in the hundreds of millions, and that's a lot of money that flows through this agency. But I think this is a key point to recognize that 63% of that is just passing right through us, right? With the guidance you all provide, whether in statute or in the budget bill, we grant and loan this out to communities to make sure that they can serve the people that they represent as well. Real high level, zooming all the way out, where does Eagle exist in the entire state of Michigan budget picture? From a rounding standpoint, we still can round and say we're 1% of the budget. You got the real number right there, which is 1.3%. But with that 1%, I think we make a really large impact. And you heard some of those things that the director mentioned on that last page. Overall budget in FY25 right now is $1.04 billion gross funding. 261 million of that is general fund, and we have 1,652 FTEs appropriated to the agency. Taking a slightly different look at it, here are the funding sources. And so there's a few things that I want to pull out for all of you on this page. You can see federal's 45%. In the FY25 budget, restricted is 30%, and then we've got a breakdown on the ongoing and the one-time general fund. A few things that I think are really important for you all to know in your role as appropriators of our budget. We're unique among state agencies. When you look at our operating budget, so when I say that, I'm talking our ongoing budget. I kind of take the one-time and set that aside. 90% of our operating budget from FY25 is fund sources that you all have limited ability to change how that is spent, right? They are restricted in some way, whether that is, restricted in state statute, and those are directed. Obviously, the legislature can take a vote to change what those statutes say about how that money can be spent, or they're restricted in some way from the feds, right? We have a federal grant that dictates how this could be spent, or there's federal programs that guide that. So that means there's a fairly small portion of the pie that is that general fund that is just completely discretionary in that process. And I think that's important for you all to know. I want to take a moment, too, to recognize that federal number. I think it's 45%. That is huge. I want to point out in some ways that's an anomaly in the current environment right now. With the last presidential administration, there was a lot of federal investments that flowed through the state. So that 45% number represents $463 million in the Eagle budget. Just to show you how that changes in the next couple of years, this is the last budget of ours that you'll see the federal bipartisan infrastructure law, water infrastructure funds that flow through the state revolving fund. This is the last budget you all see in that unless something changes at the federal program and that program's renewed. Well, that alone is $270 million. So you can imagine if we take the Eagle budget and we subtract $270 million in federal funds, how that shifts what that pie looks like. That federal number goes way down to maybe, who knows, 30% or something. I haven't done the math. And then the restricted and the state general fund go up a little bit. So I just wanted to establish that point. The other thing I wanted to point out, the one-time general fund number. So in the FY25 budget, that's 10%. It's about $110 million. That's fairly consistent, maybe a little bit on the low side with the last kind of several years of Eagle budgets that we've put through. But the point I wanted to pull out there, those are one-time programs, right? It's usually completely new programming, whether it's something the governor's proposed or something the legislature's proposed and asked us to task with. But these are new programs that we need to spin up, right? So there's programmatic development, there's RFPs, there's stakeholder engagement, And a lot of the time, most of these are, again, these are grants that we're putting out the door. But with the existing capacity that we have, we're not putting FTEs on one-time funding. That's not how you need ongoing funding for an FTE, right? But we have to spin up those programs, get them out the door with the capacity that we have. So I wanted to share that piece. So if that slide was where does the money come from, this slide is where does the money go within the agency. Few things I want to point out here. So this is a very busy pie chart, way busier than I would normally present to a legislative committee. But what we did here is we kept it matched up to the sections that you all see in our budget bill. So if you look through our budget bill 101, 102, all the way up to 113, those are what those pieces of that pie look like there. Again, you're seeing borne out very clearly what I just told you about water infrastructure funding, about the grants and loans that the director mentioned on the slide about our impact. If you just take water infrastructure funding in one time, that's more than half of our budget. The other thing I'll make sure you all notice when you look at this is as you hear our division directors come in, right, you've already heard from geologic resources, drinking water and remediation redevelopment. You hear all the work they're doing. Just look at the size of the piece of the pie on the screen that you take drinking water, for instance, 4% of the department's budget, but they're out there regulating those 10 or 11,000 public water supplies. So I wanted to pull that out a little bit. You see that really big remediation redevelopment puzzle piece? Well, that's that contaminated site work that we were in here last time talking about. That's that over $300 million and already dedicated to sites that's going to be spent over the next 5 or so years, and dedicating another 50, 60, 70 million each year. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to cover on this slide. And then the last piece here, and this is in some ways reiterating a point that you saw on the slide where I pulled out federal funding. These are just a selection, and granted, they're the biggest selection of federal grants and awards that have flowed through our department in just the past few years. A lot of these are not reflected in that Eagle budget that I just showed you because they come in as a supplemental item or something along those lines. With the capacity that we have as an agency, with those FTEs that have been appropriated, all of this money, all of these programs have been flowing through the department with these federal investments. And I just don't want that to be lost when you look at the Eagle budget and you understand the people and the funds in there. Many of these are happening outside of what I just showed you because you all appropriate them as a supplemental. But there's a tremendous amount of impact on the people of Michigan with this funding. The water infrastructure funding in those first two lines, that's going, to repair and replace drinking water systems, wastewater systems, stormwater systems. Home energy rebates, solar for all, those two are directly going out the door to lower costs around homes, around utility bills, energy generation. I won't go down the full list. You already heard from Adam on oil and gas. I think the director will talk a little bit about that climate pollution reduction grant program in a little bit here. But I just wanted to make sure you see, I'm not going to do live math here, but that looks like it's approaching $3 billion flowing through us just in the past few years on these federal one-time programs that we have to help get out the door and make sure that people in Michigan are getting those benefits. Okay.
Okay, I wanted to shift gears to give you a little overview of the proposed fiscal year 26, the exec budget recommendation. And I first give you context in terms of the governor's priorities, which are listed here, and how we fit into that. Of course, the core of this is that protecting and defending Michiganders box. This is environmental protection at its core, but also, as you've heard me talk about already, fairly important direct or indirect role relative to creating jobs and also lowering costs. I mentioned the 75,000 estimated jobs that are supported through just the water infrastructure piece. The brownfield redevelopment program on its own is estimated to have created about 19,000 jobs and a lot of activity in communities. And then, of course, there's the impact of our work in the Great Lakes and in protecting our waterways. on tourism, because those are so central to what draws people inside the state to travel, as well as people from other states and countries. Make government work better. That's one of our 4 pillars for this budget, actually, is modernizing government. So some of that is service, which we've worked a lot on. That was part of that Vision 2027 to really dial up the level of engagement and communication that we're having with stakeholders of all sorts. The amount of engagement that's required keeps growing, and so we're trying to accommodate that. And the lowering costs, what I'd say about that is probably water infrastructure is one of the biggest areas, because what we're talking about is infrastructure upgrades that are really required. If not now, then in a small number of years. And if we don't address them, we're going to have systems failing, and that'll be a lot more expensive. But it is expensive to do those kinds of upgrades. So by providing low-interest loans and at times grants, it just makes it easier for more communities to be able to do that without burdening the ratepayers. And you mentioned, Travis talked about the home energy rebates. That's directly around lowering energy costs. This is kind of a repeat of that, just that if you look at the F-26 budget specifically, it's in sync with the governor's and the state's larger goals: grow the economy, lower costs for Michiganders, and defend public health and safety. All right, so I started to reference what our priorities are there in this recommended budget. There are 4 of them. The first is water infrastructure. No big surprise. That's probably been the biggest area of investment over the last several years, and it is probably the biggest budget ask in this one, and we think that's appropriate. It's about doubling down on our recent investments over the last several years, with a particular focus on lead service line removal. The state has really been committed to being a leader in that. We have made a lot of progress, but we've got a lot of lead service lines still to go. So to do that while helping communities with other ancillary projects that would come up when you're trying to do lead service line work. We're also creating, the recommendations to create an ongoing funding source for stormwater management, which some of us in the room have been dealing with really across the state. And it's something we need to really start addressing in a real way. And then there's money in there to help support the drinking water department, which is probably the most understaffed department in the organization. Protecting and cleaning up, or preventing and cleaning up contamination, that's another area. The tipping fee proposal, which I'll go through, is in there to discourage out-of-state trash and to provide money for waste management to prevent cleanups, as well as contaminated site cleanup, brownfield redevelopment. Energy infrastructure, we've got the Renewables Ready Communities program. The federal program is the climate pollution reduction grants, but it's actually supporting a program that we already had in our state to fund public safety projects in communities that are citing renewables in their communities, and I'll say more about that. And in modernization and transparency, we have our one big proposal there is to dramatically increase the pace at which we're digitizing the records so that we can improve service, we can save taxpayers, regulated parties, and others money, and we can lower our own costs over time. So, starting with drinking water and water infrastructure. So there are 2 big elements here. There's $50 million one-time general fund and $30 million ongoing general fund that are focused around a particular focus on drinking water and lead service line and related projects. A big thing that we're trying to do here is we're trying to draw down every dollar of federal money that's available for lead service lines. But the federal money cannot go to other water infrastructure. So that's why this is focused on the kind of everything around lead service line work. And really trying to continue the task there as we have a lead and copper rule, which has become more strict. So the timeline to complete that work has shortened, and we have a lot of work to go despite successes over the last several years. There's also the money for stormwater infrastructure as well that's included in that general fund portion. And then there's just under $6 million that is an ongoing general fund that's about strengthening our ability to implement the Safe Drinking Water Act. And that does have new FTEs in it. We're still a large number of FTEs short of what we really need to do to be able to handle the full regulatory function that the drinking water, that small sliver that Travis talked about in the pie chart, is handling. And I'll move over to preventing and cleaning up contamination. I'll start with the solid waste surcharge or tipping fee, as it's commonly known, increase. This is meant to do a couple of things. First, we've become a bit of a trash destination because we have by far the lowest solid waste surcharge of any state in the upper Midwest and most states in the country. We are 1/15 of the surcharge that the average upper Midwest state has, and it's much lower than other states across the country. What that means is that we become a convenient place to send trash from Ontario or parts of Canada, some from Florida, California, all over the country, but a lot of it from our neighboring states who have a much higher tipping fee. We would use that money to discourage that, to also provide more of an incentive for people to recycle, and to put that money into waste management efforts to prevent contamination, as well as contaminated site cleanup and brownfield redevelopment work. That we're trying to make an order of magnitude improvement in the number of sites we can address. I said we have 26,000 plus sites, and you saw that we've like dramatically increased the number of sites that we're dealing with in a year, but we're still under 1,000 a year. And as we recategorize sites that exist, there may be 1,000 new sites that pop into the pipeline. We've got to break through that cycle and get to where we're getting to thousands of them in a year, and that's the goal here. The new proposal has a unique feature that wasn't in the governor's original proposal last year, which it would raise the tipping fee to $5, which is still under the average of the other states in our region. But what it would do is it would return about 45% of that money back to local governments, local units of government, to try to defray any burden that they would have from the increase. Even though the total number, if you take all those dollars across the entire state of Michigan, we're talking about $3.50 per person per year. It's not nothing, but it's not a big amount of money. But if you're running a city and you're providing trash hauling services, it can have a few zeros after it. So it's meant to address that, and also to support some local waste management efforts as well. So there would be contaminated site work that would come from that, but we also have a little bit of money, $15 million, which is one-time state restricted funds from our Clean Michigan Initiative bond fund, which has been fully spent, but we have money from interest that is accumulated in there that is earmarked for brownfield redevelopment and contaminated site cleanup. So that would supplement those efforts. We did sort of a one-time amount here that would help us to jumpstart that broader contaminated site cleanup effort. There's a little bit of money in here. This is totally federal money from the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative to do assessment of sites that we're hoping to initiate cleanup in the Detroit River area of concern. So that would jumpstart that effort. And then there are some fee changes here that we're proposing in the water resources area, the hazardous waste management compliance area, and underground gas storage fees. These are three areas where the fees have not changed that we're charging the regulated community, have not changed in 20 or 30 years. In some cases, they've never changed. And we're all trying to we're trying to help lower people's costs. I totally understand that. The problem here is that we have, just to staff the proportion that has been supported by fees continues to go down. And the answer to that has been general fund money to support the staff and the efforts of the department to do their regulatory authority and responsibilities. The cost of an employee in our probably all of state government, but certainly our agency, has gone up by about 50% since 2002 or early parts of the 2000s, when a lot of these fees were last updated. So for every dollar in, if the fees are staying the same, we're basically getting we're not being able to cover the basic costs of running the regulatory function, and that means it's up to general fund to support. So the taxpayers, in other words, as opposed to the people who are actually benefiting directly from the permitting or the other areas that are involved here. There's also money for septic code database. This is a one-time general fund, $7 million, and it would support the creation of a statewide septic code database. That would be an important step if we move to a statewide septic code, or even if we don't, just to be able to track and understand where there are issues. That's pretty central to being able to do that work effectively. We have half our state that depends on groundwater for their drinking water, either directly through their well or through a city or a municipality that gets it from groundwater. And there's a big concern there about contamination, as it has happened due to septic code issues, or septic system issues. So that's the preventing and cleaning up contamination. Third area is strengthening energy infrastructure and supporting local communities. I mentioned this Renewables Ready Communities program. We did a pilot program that the legislature approved a couple years ago. It's been quite successful. We've had, I think it's about 24 communities that have benefited from that. They're all over the state. So the way this works is that for communities who cite renewables, it provides funding through a federal program, a federal grant that we received, for infrastructure. This could be a fire truck. It could be a playground. It could be, I think in Presque Isle, I think there's a courthouse that was upgraded. We've got it from all over the Dickinson County and the UP down to the Wayne County, Metro Detroit. I think in Downriver there's a Downriver Fairground that was funded through this. This is the money that's really hard to get for local communities, and there's been a lot of demand for this. And it doesn't correlate very well to political affiliation, I can just tell you that. It's all over the place. It's a chance for money for those communities. We received this grant last July. It's $129 million, and it was put in for FY24 supplemental. It has never been appropriated. We have 25 other states that have this program. Red states, blue states, unaffiliated states, and they're spending the money regularly right now, and we can't. So that's you like the unaffiliated states?
No, I forgot we hadn't done the supplemental.
Yeah. It's money sitting there that could really benefit a lot of communities. So that's the end of my pitch on that. We have $10 million in there for clean fuel and electric vehicle charging. It's not an EV mandate. It's just recognizing, as the governor's been consistent about, that we want to support whatever choice of vehicle people have, internal combustion engine, EV, or something in between. And this would be really focused on the areas not close to an interstate or a lot of the existing EV charging stations, but shopping malls, apartment complexes, things of that nature, where people live, work, and play. There's also a little bit of money in there. Part of that, the $0.3 million of the 10.3 is for the state match, our portion of the Lake Michigan circuit, which is the Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, around Lake Michigan effort that we had agreed to several years ago. That's the gist of that. And I have one other area, which is making state government more modern and transparent, and this is this records digitization proposal. It's a lot of money, $39 million. But it's a one-time proposal here, and it would support software enhancements and contractors to increase dramatically the pace of our records digitization efforts. We've been in the midst of doing that work over the last several years. What percentage of it have we gotten done? Is 25 or 30%?
Probably 30, 35.
Yeah. And we've already reduced FOIAs pretty significantly. We've saved, I think, the service in those areas for those sites where we actually have digitized records. They're uploaded already on our RIDE database, and you can get this information. About 70%, I think, or some number like that, of all of our records are in our remediation and redevelopment division. So people who, you may have a developer or an individual who wants to buy a piece of property, may want to develop it, turn it into a business that creates jobs. And the way it works right now, they send us a notification. They make a FOIA request because they have to know the condition of the property, the history of the property. That takes a little while. They pay a fee for that. We process it. That takes a while. That means going into stacks where we've got these boxes and trying to dig out all of them and digitize them one piece at a time. And it just puts it all online. It's a transparency opportunity. It's a way to improve service. And we estimate about $4 million in just the core savings of that. That doesn't count the amount of space that we wouldn't allocate to it and the other benefits that come to it. So it has a lot of benefits to everybody involved, and it fits in with a lot of what I talked about under our Vision 2027. So I think I've covered the ground here. That's a good overview of both fiscal year 25, the current budget, and then what the governor's proposal is for 26. So happy to entertain any questions.
All right. Thank you, Director. We appreciate that. Do we have any? Yep. Rep. Steckloff.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director, for being with us today. Two things. First, I want to thank you for all of your work on the tipping fees. I've been hearing about Canadian trash for decades now, all the way going back to Aldo Vagnosi, so a really long time ago. We discussed how local communities, we'd be able to get some funding back to them. Do you know by any chance if school districts are included in that 45% for local governments?
The impression we have, and we haven't fully researched this for every community, but that very often the school is a budget line within a city's budget. So the city receives the money, and presumably it'd be allocated for that across the different elements of city government where trash is involved and being hauled.
Thank you. Yeah, and then the next, next thing I want to just discuss real quick. Last time we were in here, we discussed the lead service line. Yeah, the lead line that need to be completed by, I think you said 2037?
That's right.
So in order to make the match of whatever's left in the Infrastructure Act, do you know what we would need to spend to get the full match of available dollars from the federal government?
Yeah, you may have a more precise answer, but the request here has that in mind.
Okay, it does.
With maybe
Okay.
a little bit extra, because we'd be leveraging about $70 million in federal money in the current cycle, or the upcoming cycle. So it's hard to say, because what we're talking about is for different communities, they may have done water main work and now they're just doing lead service lines and a smaller non-lead service line amount required, whereas other communities, they're starting from scratch. So there's more involved. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. I'll just add a little more, just to remind the committee, it's not a direct traditional match, right? We don't need to appropriate money at the state level to draw down those federal dollars. We already are in line for those. Unless something changes federally, we have no reason to believe we won't get them. In the budget that we're talking about here, right, the FY26 budget proposal, that'll be the last year that we expect to receive those dollars. Just going off past experience, numbers could change. It probably is somewhere around what the director said, $70 million of bill lead service line money. Just to do a little math live, if you take those numbers that I threw out in the last committee on kind of what we've seen the project proportions be, right? So we had lead service line portion and then total project portion, and those were about a 4 or 5 times multiplier of the lead service line. So you just do that on that 70 million, and you're talking around $300 million of total anticipated project just to cover that lead service line portion. That's going to change year to year, but it gives you a sense of like what communities might be looking for in association with those lead service line projects we'll have that funding for.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Vice Chair Borton.
Thank you, Chair Cavett. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Deputy Director. Appreciate your presentation today. I've got a couple just quick questions, if I may. I assume the answers will be quick, too. One of them was I noticed in here it said that the new proposed budget would cut red tape. How would that cut red tape?
Well, I think the digitization proposal is one of them, and I think that's a really good illustrative example of one important aspect where I think it's perceived as red tape. You know, you're having to send in FOIA requests, wait to get those processed, send in a fee, dramatically shortening that time both on the person who's requesting the information about a property as well as for our staff. They don't have to dig into boxes. The stuff is all available. But we have efforts across our permitting function, across all of what we do, where this is something we're working on all the time. We do probably, you know the number, but it's a handful of lean process improvements across all of our different areas to try to simplify those functions, both permitting and non-permitting functions. So it's something we're pretty focused on. And it's maybe a little bit invisible in the early days, but we've seen some big improvements in some programs as a result of that.
Okay, time for one more?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Regarding the fee increases, you talked quite a bit about the tipping fees. You talked a little bit about the Water Resource Division fees. But I've got some questions on a couple of these other ones. The hazardous waste fee, you're looking at 17 new FTEs, doubling the fees. And then also what I'm concerned with is oil and gas monitoring fees going from $20 a year to $250 a year. What happens if these fees aren't increased? How will we be affected?
Yeah, let me take the hazardous waste one first. We have a very small staff that handles what we call particularly small-scale waste generators. That one of the things I realized early in my time here is that they caused a disproportionate number of the new contaminated sites across the state, or even the historic ones. Platers would be an example. And one of the things we've realized is that when we can get people into those sites, we can be really helpful. And I'm not talking about issuing violation notices. I'm talking about helping them with best management practices in a business that's challenging. You're dealing with a lot of hazardous chemicals. The profit margins aren't very high. They get squeezed often by their companies that they supply. And the problem is that at the current ratio right now, we can get into sites like that once every 16 years on average. So those visits end up being when we hear there's a problem often. If we could get in there once every, I forgot what we're targeting, like 3 years, something like that, with this proposal, it means we're getting in there and we're preventing a lot of contamination, hopefully, by getting in there and helping them, and hopefully making it easier for them to run their operations. So that's an example there. Do you want to address the oil and gas?
Yeah. So the oil and gas fee that you brought up is specifically for gas storage wells, right? So there's other fees in oil and gas related to like oil and gas production. These, if you'll remember when Adam Wygant was in here maybe a month or so ago, he talked about Michigan has the largest natural gas storage of any state. I believe that's the accurate statement. These fees are just for our regulation of those gas storage wells, so it's not production. By and large, those are mostly owned and maintained by large utilities. This is a program where other fees that other industry are paying are subsidizing the regulation the department provides over those, right? I can't remember the exact number. We can find out what that fee is currently doing. But this ask is centered around, let's just raise this fee enough so it can support 3 people, and we can stop having the oil and gas industry or other kind of extractive industry subsidizing the regulation provided by the department for this industry specifically. So no huge smoking gun of, if this doesn't happen, this goes away, but I think it is a fairness thing. Don't ask others to pay for what you should pay for.
All right. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair Borton. Excuse me. There's a perception that government keeps growing. I get that question all the time. And I see you have 1,570 Eagle employees. Mm-hmm. And in the current fiscal year, you're authorized for 1,652 FTEs. And then in the proposed budget, you request 134 more, which they tell me is 8.1% increase. You've had similar demands every year for the past 6 or 7 years. But in the quarterly reports, you consistently have vacancies, a couple hundred vacancies that you have. So I guess my question is, since you always have these vacancies, why does the department keep asking for more FTEs? Why don't you transfer those around and fill those spots?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you'd only know the answer to it if you were inside the shop. We, first of all, for perspective, 1,752 proposed FTEs in this new budget, which is a significant increase from this year. That just gets us to about where we were in 2002. There was a dramatic drop in the FTEs in the period from there until about 2018 or so. It got down to about 1,200 people. So it's just getting us up to about where we were if this budget is adopted. And yet the regulatory responsibilities and the grant making and grant administration responsibilities that Travis was talking about have increased pretty dramatically. So just I don't have a handy stat on it, but the amount of work involved per person I think has gone up quite a bit. In terms of the vacancy issue, we try to get to a target by the end of a fiscal year of around 5% vacancies. That's an amount that would help us deal with retirements and imbalances, just sort of natural. You never quite get up to 1,752 in this budget, probably by the end of the year. Otherwise, across the department, you would have some areas that are at capacity and cannot hire anymore, and you might just have little imbalances. At the beginning of the fiscal year, of course, we can't start recruiting for those positions until the fiscal year turns each year. We often are in the 10% range, something like that, earlier in the fiscal year. It's over the course of the year that it gets down to our target. So right now, we're running about where we would like to run, and that keeps us from just being short of staff.
All right, thank you. Rep. Price?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here today. I have 2 questions related to federal funding. You pointed out how much the department relies on federal funding and passes it through to essential services. Could you give us an idea of if federal funding is withheld, how that would impact your department?
Yeah, I'll start this, and you feel free to jump in. We have a couple different types of federal funds that come in. We have I think they're called categorical grants that just provide funding for the basic regulatory functions that EPA has delegated to us. I don't know the exact percentage on that, but that's an ongoing number that if we took out all of the grants that you talked about that have come in over the last few years, and the post-COVID money and the IRA and other federal initiatives, let's say it might be 30% or something like that of our funding, 25-30%, I'm guessing. That is central to our basic functioning at the level that we are at right now, because we are given duties that the EPA has delegated to us, and we have to be able to fulfill them. So then when you take a lot of the newer money, let's call it, the ones that have supported water infrastructure and energy in other areas, in water infrastructure, it's had a transformative impact. And of course, all of that evaporating, or a large amount of it, would have a significant impact on us. We still have, we gave out $1.7 billion last year in grants and loans through the SRF, State Revolving Fund, and other sources. And the gap between that and the actual demand is quite significant. There's more gap than there is that we're filling. So we're still trying to work away this 50 to 100 year aging infrastructure issue. So it would slow our ability to address that. And that's certainly true with energy and the climate related work and other things. You want to add to this? Yeah.
Could I ask a follow-up question?
Of course, thank you.
And specifically, the federal funds, like the renewable ready communities that have already been appropriated, how do we make sure that we get that money to you, and what programs or resources will be at risk if we fail to do so?
Well,
Thank you.
what was the original allocation for the pilot dollar?
30 million in the state budget.
30 million. So that we've been working on this pilot, $30 million, and so far we've had 24 or 25 communities that have been served, and it's a pretty impressive list. If you're ever interested, I'll show you some of the projects that it's had, those hard to find dollars that local communities have to, buy a fire truck, to renovate a courthouse, whatever it might be. A lot of it's roads. It's really been a boost to those communities. So now what we're talking about is $129 million that's available to that, so that we could pretty dramatically increase that. One of the pieces of that program is also renewables on brownfield sites, which we've had a lot of discussions and controversies about where do you put renewable energy resources. I think we can all agree, if you're going to do it, brownfield sites are a good place to do it. So that would be a really big opportunity, an economic development driver. And you can see it several times the magnitude of what we've been able to do so far. And I guess the biggest thing is we've been awarded the money. Other states, regardless of their political affiliation, are spending that money, and it's having an impact with their own grants that they have been awarded. So I just like to see us, all we really need it to be appropriated so we can spend it.
Director, our office, we regularly get complaints and concerns from constituents about the timeliness on permits being issued, or more importantly, that the application provisions in that are changed. How does the department justify that, not getting or changing the rules in the middle and then not replying in a timely manner?
Can you, changing the rules, can you give an example?
Not at the moment,
Okay,
no, sir.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just, we hear that, and it's always hard to track down.
If my guess would probably be, if you're doing riprap or hard surface, and we have a lot of waterfront property in my district.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of them come from. They don't feel that necessarily they've changed it. They were told that they could put this in, but perhaps it's changed midway through. And those aren't costs. Those are very costly improvements on someone's property, as I know you know.
Yeah. And this is, and I've personally handled a lot of those complaints or concerns that have come in, and I am personally trying to get a handle on it. I'll tell you what my sense of it is, that the rules themselves haven't changed, but we have, what we've tried to instill in the culture here, and I think the governor and the administration has tried to instill this as a solution orientation, trying to get to a yes. And so sometimes when you take a question like you cited, or how big of a dock can I put in this spot, there's generally a rule about the minimizing impact, and we try to be as clear as we can about what that means based on what we've done in other sites. And sometimes when you're trying to get to a solution, what I've discovered in a few of the cases that I've researched is that we'll have somebody who thinks somebody else got something that was a little bit more to them. I can assure you that's never intentional. It's taking all of these as a case-by-case basis. But it's certainly something we're looking at to try to alleviate that issue. We've tried to also lean into, I like to say, increase a bit of our extroversion as an agency, because we have a lot of engineers and technical people who are doing that hard work of evaluating a site or a permit and trying to get to a solution there that complies with the law and also gets the job done as much as we can within the constructs of the law. I think just trying to dial up our communication, and that's included as we've got, as some of you maybe sent complaints or issues or concerns in. I see most of those, and we try to jump on them right away. We're not always great at it. They're complicated, too. That was the first thing that I realized. When I try to get to the bottom of a story like that, and even if I've got lots of people helping me, it's not a simple read, and there's often back and forth with the regulated party that's a little more complicated than meets the eye. We're just trying to work through that and try to be better at it. And sometimes we succeed and sometimes we don't, but we're trying our best on that.
Right. Thank you, Director. Is there any other questions? Chair? No? Okay. All right. Thank you both very much for being here.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, thank you very much, Director, Vice Director. Okay. Rep. Steckloff moves to excuse absent members. There being no objections, the most prevails by unanimous consent. There being no further business before this meeting is adjourned.